Naltrexone is not habit-forming like the other ones. You can stop it, and you won't go into withdrawals. Two things it does, as I said, it shields the opiate receptor. Number two, it reduces cravings tremendously for the use of opiates. Now, people that want to be on this type of treatment, they have to stop opiates, and then they go through withdrawals. That is the problem. They are unable to stop in order to get that. There are modalities that we offer there to deal with the withdrawals. They consist of medications. Some of these medications, they might not work, but there's two other modalities of treatment, like you could do maybe sedation detox or conscious sedation with the use of certain stimulators to get rid of the withdrawals and engage naltrexone so that it occupies the opiate receptor to make that receptor clean. I've seen patients that are clean without opiates. Their mothers, they tell me, wow, you know what? This is the person that I've known before when he was young. How beautiful. His eye connection is so nice. His laugh is nice. So there are modalities. It can be one of these treatments, agonist therapy or antagonist therapy. And obviously, let's not forget psychotherapy. Psychotherapy consists of cognitive behavioral therapy. You identify certain stressful situations. There is motivational interviewing, all that is good. And relapse prevention also is good for the psychotherapy. 12-step is really good. You know, you identify the problem and you deal with it. And if all fails, obviously there's one God that will help. Maybe we should ask Father Anthony for that.
Now, Dr.
We need mediation.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask you, for the Chaldean parents here, what are the early signs of drug abuse, drug addiction? How can you tell the difference if your son is addicted to heroin, addicted to Vicodin, or they're just being a tired and reclusive teenager?
There are some behavioral signs you could identify. The person withdrawn, not interacting with the family. Schooling is deteriorating. Work is deteriorating. Their overall hygiene, the way they present, is different too. And you see money disappearing from home, asking for more money. There are actually certain other, I asked a patient of what could these be. I'm going to read them for you. This was actually a mother who used, she's clean, and her son uses. So do you feel desperate when you're almost out? Do you feel the family and the friends about, do you lie about getting the money, or do you feel scared and alone? Have you stolen money from family or friends? Are you using more each time? Have you lost interest in everyday life? So these are some of the things that would identify and should raise a flag.
Once they suspect use, what should they do?
Once they suspect using opiates?
Once a parent is suspecting that their child, teenager, young adult is using drugs, such as talking about heroin or Vicodin, they're having some of the signs you're describing. What's the next step for the parents?
Well, you have to confront them with that. You could get like urine drug screens from the pharmacy. You could do drug screening. If there's a problem, you have to intervene, like, you know, professionally, and you could seek the help of a doctor.
What if, usually a teenager would say, leave me alone. What do you do then?
Well, if I'm the father, I will confront him. I have to do that. You know, you just cannot, you know, shun that problem away. You have to confront and deal with the problem.
So, how do you confront? Do you take them to the doctor for a drug screen? Do you bring a drug screen kit home? Do you
Drug drug screens, they're offered in the pharmacies. You can obtain them. You can do the drug screen at home, or you could do screening at the doctor. So these are possible things that can be done.
I want to take it to Father Anthony in terms of his experience. Probably gets a lot of questions regarding drug addiction, either from people who are addicted to it in confession or mothers asking for advice. How do you deal with it?
Well, first of all, one of the main problem is actually getting someone to admit to the advice. A lot of times, mothers will come and say, my son is I think he's on drugs. Okay, well, bring him here to me. Oh, I don't know where he is right now, or I can't get a hold of him, or he doesn't want to see you, whatever it may be. And so the one thing I want to encourage everyone here, I see even a lot of young people here today, under the age of 18. There are many things that people are doing wrongly that are, they're hurting their bodies. And the one thing we have to do is never give up on somebody. Maybe I never had any addictions, but those who know me very well, I can't stand waking up early in the morning. I'm not a morning person. And a friend of mine told me, he said, we have to start working out. We have to start working out together. I said, okay, what time? He said, 6:40 in the morning. I said, no, thank you, I won't be there. And every morning, he came to the church I was at 6:40, and would wait for me to come outside. No matter how many times I said, I'm sick, I'm tired, I would find any excuse not to work out. He said, I don't care, I'll be there at 6:40. And every day for 3 years, I worked out at 6:40 because someone never gave up on me. And a lot of you guys maybe have some people who are your friends, who are at school, you see at work, who have some kind of addiction. It could be alcohol, it could be marijuana, it could be one of these heroin or something like that. When you see someone struggling with a problem, you never give up on them. Never ever. Keep bothering them, keep annoying them, keep pushing them, keep encouraging them until somehow, some way they break from that addiction. And I see a lot of times in our community, I will see mothers and fathers give up on their children. I had enough, I can't do it anymore, I don't care. And when something bad happens, they regret that they've taken that step away from their child, that break from someone who needed help. So I do have people that come and say, we have a problem. And one thing that you have to do is, a lot of times I think we're too harsh on those who are addicted. Right away, they're being put down, they're being called names, they're being insulted, and then they kind of just distance themselves anymore. They lose the trust of someone that they have. So if you know someone who has a problem, don't be that insulting person. Don't be the negative person who puts them down. Rather than one that says, it's okay, I love you, I'm here to help you. Let's try certain things. Let's go see a doctor together. Let's go see a priest together. And the reason I became a priest, because I truly know that God's grace works. I know it. I don't think it, I don't somewhat believe it, I know. I know God's grace works. And I've seen God's grace work in people who had addictions. I know of a few people who came in with a problem to me 5-6 years ago. Their parents thought that it was hopeless. That person had a little bit of faith. And when it grew and grew, they were able to break free because of their faith. And I was happy to marry some of them, even baptize their children, for those who thought that they were finished. Because for some reason they had some faith. So don't ever look at someone and say, you don't love God, you don't trust God because of this addiction. No, have a lot of hope that God's going to make things work. A lot of us have been touched by different miracles, whether we were healed from some kind of sickness, something happened good in our lives. We know that God's grace works in our lives. And God's grace will work in their lives too, as long as we trust in Him. At the same time, we're called to help those who are in need through prayer. There are people I've tried to fix, whether they were addictions or certain family issues. If I couldn't help them, I at least prayed for them. And I can list hundreds of stories in history of the saints or whatever it may be, where people prayed for someone and the grace of God saved them. So, there's one thing, I love Dr. Stock. One thing I like he didn't say. He said, when everything fails, we turn to God. No, doctor, God first, okay? So we always turn to God first. And as for His grace and His praying, of course, we have to go through all the methods that He went through, but always keep God the number one and always keep clinging to Him. A lot of times we lose hope, and when we lose faith, the one who's caring for the person who's addicted, we could discourage them. So always have hope in that God will make things right, and never give up on someone. If you ask me, in the past 7 years, the young people who had problems and addictions, What was the worst thing? That people gave up on them. And so, boys and girls, even those where I have awesome young ones in the front row, you know, you see a friend who has a problem, with something they're doing wrong, don't be afraid to go up to them, don't be afraid to talk to them, don't be afraid to help them. And never give up on those who need your help. Maybe God brought them into your life for a reason, and you stick to whatever God's plan has for you. Amen?
Amen. Thank you, Brother Anthony. To my right is Judge Diane D'Agostini. She's a judge. She applies the law. If you're an addict, worst thing that can happen to you, basically the last square in the game would be if you end up in the morgue. There was a pathologist that worked in the morgue. I can't remember what state. He recently retired because he was sick of doing all the exams on dead addicts, and he decided that he should become a priest instead to catch them early on. But before the morgue, possibly one of the worst scenarios is you end up in jail, but it's definitely better than dying. So Judge D'Agostini deals with plenty of people that broke the law. As you know, using heroin is a crime. Not everybody knows that using your mom's Vicodin she got for knee replacement last year is pretty much an equal crime. So a lot of people get arrested with half a pill or a pill in their pocket. They end up in front of Judge D'Agostini, or they could be addicts that steal pills from people. They've been doing it for 20 years. I want to ask Judge D'Agostini, I know she has to apply the law. She cannot change the law. But I want to ask her, what would she have wished those people would have done different before coming in front of her?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I have to tell you very honestly, I was thinking 10 people would be here, and I don't say that rudely. I go to events to talk about drugs and alcohol, and sometimes barely anyone shows up. And especially in our community, sometimes it's difficult. There's a stigma, sometimes there's people that are embarrassed to appear, so I give you all credit, and I thank you for being here. I know how difficult it is. Maybe you're here just to hear about it so you can talk to your kids. Maybe you have a family member. Maybe you're struggling yourself. If there's anything uncomfortable that you don't want to ask in a question, you can call me at work. You can approach me afterwards. I'd be happy to talk to you. My name is Diane D'Agostini, so I have to mention the Duchu, okay? English, or anybody not understanding? Anybody not understanding? Because if we need to translate. Thank you, son. Thank you. You don't want me to speak Surat. It's not very good, but thank you, Father, for inviting us here. Well, I've been a judge for 17 years now, with your help. And when I first became a judge, I would see cases involving marijuana, definitely alcohol, and cocaine. In the last 2 years, our worlds have been just, I guess, really affected in the court system by opiates, heroin, and prescription drugs. Dr. George mentioned what some of these prescriptions are. You have to understand, when I'm seeing the person in court, that means they've committed a crime. So at that point, it's getting very difficult. These people are stealing from their families. That's usually what I see. And if you can believe it, yes, parents call the police on their kids. And they should. They should when they're stealing thousands of dollars from them and they need help. Sometimes people think that the court system, is always there to punish you and penalize you. I can tell you that we have put so many people through forced drug treatment, because at that point, either you're going to go to jail or you're going to treatment. So a lot of people will do the treatment instead of going to jail. And I can tell you there have been so many people whose lives have dramatically changed because they committed that crime. They came to court and they were forced to get into drug treatment. I'm not going to tell you that it works for everybody, because it doesn't. I wish it did. I wish I didn't see death cases. I wish I didn't see awful, awful cases. But the reality of it is I have. And the reality is, when you get to a point like Dr. George described, where you're so addicted, you won't care who you steal from. And you will put a gun in somebody's face, and you will rob someone, and sometimes even kill someone. 2 cases I had in the last year really emphasized to me the heroin problem. I had a young girl who was from West Bloomfield, who was stealing just everything out of her family's house, her cousin's house. If she'd go to a relative's house, she'd steal jewelry from the bedroom, money out of people's purses. From her family, she was just stealing all day long. She was stealing for her drug addiction. It got to be so bad, her parents called the police, and so I had this case in court where she was stealing from her parents. But while she was stealing and while she was in court, her mom would take her to Detroit and meet at the McDonald's there where she would meet her heroin dealer and she would buy drugs. So I was drug testing her and she tested positive for heroin, and I said, what's going on here? You know, where are you getting drugs from? You're on court supervision. And then she said, well, my mom takes me to McDonald's and I bought the heroin there. And I was stunned, and I looked at the mother and I said, how could you do this? How could you? She's here in court, you know she's gonna go to jail. And the mother said, I would rather take her to her dealer and get the drugs than see her go through withdrawals. When I really thought about the dynamics of a mother doing that to a daughter, it really painted for me the picture of how powerful, and I mean powerful, an addiction is to these drugs. It's very, very frightening. The second case I had was a case where the drug dealer, the person that sold the heroin to this young lady, she was a young lady studying to be a teacher. She told her dad, I'm going upstairs to my room to study. He didn't think anything of it. She sneaked out of the house, went right up here to Lone Pine and Orchard Lake, met her drug dealer, and bought the pills and heroin, and anyways, she OD'd that night. Next morning, Dad goes into her room, and she's blue, and she had her phone in her hand, so she was trying to call for help, but she died. The reason that case came to court, obviously she was dead, but it was because the drug dealer was prosecuted, and there is a law now that if they can find the drug dealer who sold the drugs to that person who dies, that person will be charged. That case was absolutely terrible because the father came in and had to testify about what it was like seeing his daughter when she said she was going to go study, and then the following morning when she had died. He had no idea. He described, you know, how she was a great student. Everything was going on great in her life, and that's what we see. People that can effectively hide their addiction and run their lives without their family members even knowing about it. I guess if you make it to the court system, you've committed a crime, but I can tell you, like I said at the beginning, sometimes it works out for the best, because I won't hesitate to keep somebody in jail if they're on drugs. Sometimes that's the best place for them. If I think they're gonna use drugs and you know, possibly hurt themselves or someone else, it's not just themselves. I have seen so much domestic violence where drugs and alcohol are at the root, and other crimes as well. People, like I said, will do anything for a drug fix. They'll rob the stores, they'll use guns, and certain people should be in jail. So you have to look at this really, first of all, step back and see what the individual needs. How can we help this person? There are a variety of treatment programs. You have the people sitting here at the table, West Bloomfield Community Coalition, who I do some work with. Lisa is there at the table, and some of the other ladies. First of all, thank you all for appearing here. Families Against Narcotics. There are so many resources, ladies and gentlemen. People say to me, I don't know what to do. There are so many resources. Most of the hospitals have treatment centers. There are community events you can go to. There are coalitions where you can hear speaking events you can send your kids to. There are 3-quarter houses where people can live and be drug tested and, you know, get back on track. There are treatment centers that you don't have to commit a crime for. You can go to these places. The problem is, most people, until they're confronted, and I mean really confronted, don't want to go. And there's another problem in our community. It's the stigma and the shame. Some parents rather ignore it before realizing what's happening. And believe me, I understand that, because I see the parents' faces when they're crying in court. I see what they're going through. No one wants to be in this situation. first and foremost, how do you not be in this situation? That's the way I look at it is, you must speak to your children at a very, very young age. You know, when I speak to the young kids, when I have field trips, I tell them drugs are evil, they can kill you, and that's the truth. And I try and scare them because that is the truth. If I see one more addicted young person who has given up their life to drugs, I don't know, it's very distressing to see that every day. You know, kids with great potential who are making these choices in life. So there's lots of things you can do to prevent this from happening, and I'm really talking to the parents. Really know where your kids are going, know who their friends are, check their rooms, you know, check their phones, know what's going on in your house. It is your house. And let's not just talk about heroin, let's talk about marijuana. Okay, let's talk about alcohol. How many countless young people, our people, do I see in court drinking to excess and driving and causing accidents and doing terrible things? This alcohol problem is really getting out of control. It's not just drugs, and alcohol is a drug, by the way. So I just want to tell you all this because I see the realities of people violating the law, hurting themselves, hurting their families, and hurting each other. Obviously, no one wants to be in that situation. Do we try and help those people as best as we can? Yes, but there's also accountability. You know, we are all subject to the law, and when you violate the law, you have to be held accountable. So, again, seeing this from two perspectives, accountability, sure, you could put somebody in jail, but does that necessarily fix the problem long term? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. For some people, 14 days in jail is a wake-up call and it turns them around. For other people, jail and a treatment center where they're drug tested. I can tell you right now, going through Christmas and the holiday season, everybody that's on probation to me is drug testing a lot, and they know it, and they know if they fail a drug test, they're going to jail. So I can let them live their lives, you know, the way they want to live them, but without drugs and alcohol, and the testing is what works really well. So to the parents here, I really applaud you being here. To the young people, so many young people, I give you so much credit. You know, so many times in court I'll see a kid there that's on a drug charge, and I'll say, well, where did you get it from? And they'll always say, my good friend, my best friend. You know, you guys, you gotta pick your friends carefully and stay away from the kids that are using this stuff. Stay away, because if you don't, inevitably they'll bring you into their world, and that's how this stuff grows to some degree. You know, people start telling each other, hey, it's a great high, you gotta try this. And once you try heroin, quite frankly, you know, they say that particular drug, once you try it once, you're gonna go back for more. And beating it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Beating it is one of the toughest things for a person to do. Last year, I had a young man who was in on a simple case, and he was on heroin, and he was going through withdrawals. I was about to sentence him, and then I could tell for sure he was really out of it, and something was wrong, and he was acting really crazy in court. So I decided I would put him in jail. He immediately threatened me, because that's what happens when you go through withdrawals. You don't care who you threaten, you don't care what you say, you don't care what you do. It is something terrifying to watch, and you don't want to see anybody in that predicament. But I take it back, peel it back to the simplest thing. Don't get involved in the first place. Thank you.